Who doesn't want to fly a stealth bomber with incredible firepower? Well, stick around and we'll explore that idea. I'm Forrester, and in this video I'll be reviewing the Star Citizen ship, the Aegis Eclipse. Star Citizen is currently in alpha testing, and the Eclipse is one of the flyable ships. The Eclipse is a single-seater and is described as a stealth bomber. For those of you who've seen my other ship reviews, you'll recognise the usual format for this one. I've split into 5 sections, starting with a ship tour, assessing combat performance, reviewing handling and visibility, looking at the operating costs, before finally summarising. I've included timestamps in the video description to help navigate to each part of the review. And if you enjoy this review, please do subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. That helps you to be notified of future videos and helps me to grow the audience. Part 1. Ship Tour. So as I walk around the outside of the Eclipse, I'm afraid there's not a lot for me to say in the way of ship tour for this one. The only internalised space available for crew is the front cockpit, which has seating for the pilot and the pilot only. It's accessed via a ladder on the left-hand side of the Eclipse. Part 2. Combat Performance. So, in terms of armament, the Eclipse is armed with 2 fixed size 2 weapons, defaulting to Scorpion ballistic repeaters. But the main armament is actually 3 size 9 missiles, which do an absolutely insane amount of damage. By my calculations, and take this with a pinch of salt, but I think that the 3 missiles are powerful enough to knock out 35 Eclipse worth of shields. That's a lot of firepower. The downside, and yes of course there's a downside, is twofold. Firstly, the aim time on the missiles is fairly long, meaning you want to start your engagement from a fair distance away. The Eclipse does have a nice stealth profile which lends itself to supporting that. Secondly, the Eclipse only carries 3 of those missiles, and they're the real damage dealing potential of the ship, which makes many of the combat missions that require more than 3 kills very difficult for your average skill level pilot, such as me. Now, don't get me wrong, from a balancing perspective that makes a lot of sense. I can't stress enough how powerful those missiles are, but equally that means you have to take your pick of missions carefully. Outside of the weaponry, the Eclipse carries 2 small shield generators. They don't protect much, but they regenerate fairly quickly if you've only taken a glancing blow. And the hull of the Eclipse is more rugged than you might expect, able to soak up a little damage. Although I would point out that the cockpit is particularly vulnerable to being knocked out, which is effectively a kill. Part 3. Handling and Visibility. Starting with the handling, the Eclipse does handle fairly well. What really took me by surprise, given the design to look similar to a stealth bomber, is how well the thrusters were able to yaw the craft from left to right, even sometimes not being sensitive enough to smaller movements. Given the size of the ship, that's pretty impressive. And the nose is able to point just fine. Even against some of the faster moving craft, the Eclipse was able to keep her nose facing the target enough to get a missile lock, and it wasn't particularly difficult to keep the fixed weapons firing on target. Whilst the top speed is fairly good, acceleration and deceleration were a little more sluggish. That's not to say bad, but I wouldn't say good either. The real plus here is that it's predictable, which is helpful for planning landings. This shows up most when transitioning to atmospheric flight. In atmosphere, it was clear that the Eclipse was not as nimble as some of the combat fighter craft that I've recently reviewed, but I found that the symptom of this was that the flying wing would just bleed off airspeed rather than cause a dangerous situation. So in that regard, the Eclipse is fairly forgiving. In the gravity of a moon without atmosphere, the wing impact is no longer evident, and as such, with some generous application of afterburner, the Eclipse was capable of some fairly bold manoeuvres. And that brings me on to talk about visibility. When I first hopped in the cockpit, I was nervous, as clearly there was an enclosed top and bottom, which immediately made me think this was going to be another MISC Freelancer or Starfarer type experience, with a thin sliver to see out of. Thankfully, the Eclipse doesn't fall into the same trap, and actually, visibility feels pretty reasonable. Certainly, takeoff and landing felt intuitive. The stock Quantum Drive, although a stealth variant, wasn't overly slow, and moreover delivered a reasonable range. The Eclipse is able to traverse most of the Stanton system in search of a kill, perhaps only needing to refuel Quantum once for a particularly long journey. Part 4. Operating costs. So I'll start with the obvious. This thing makes money from killing things. With a carefully selected combat mission, you can use the missiles for quick kills, and I find that rearming the missiles is usually a lot less than the mission profit. Repairs can end up being about 1000 Alpha UEC if you take some fair damage, but again that's not going to eliminate your profits. The key is taking the right combat missions, ideally with 3 or fewer ships to kill, so that you can leverage the power of those missiles. That said, that's not going to be any large amount of profit, and I'd say the money-making potential is nowhere near that of the Freelancer or the Prospector or even the Caterpillar, which is for this pledge price point. But then, the Eclipse is a combat ship, so perhaps that's not as important, if it covers its costs, which it does. And that's really the only option I've found. There's no cargo bay of any type or storage for anything physicalized, so no choice about taking anything other than combat missions. Which leads me on to Part 5, The Verdict. So the Eclipse is available for $300 or in-game for 3.5 million Alpha UEC. The Eclipse is very niche, and I'd say you'd either buy it for the looks or for a very unique stealth killer gameplay, probably more tailored towards taking out unsuspecting players. Personally, I'm drawn to think that it's not worth the purchase price, simply due to just how limited the gameplay is for said price, when there are other options out there that I think can deliver a more compelling experience. But I do accept that the Eclipse looks absolutely fantastic, and it is lethal. I'm expecting a lot of love for the Eclipse in the comments, so I'm sorry I couldn't say more nice things about it. If you own an Eclipse and are flying it around the verse, please let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you found this review helpful, please press that like button. You may also be interested in my review of the Vanguard, which I'd suggest as a good alternative option to the Eclipse at a similar price point. Please also consider subscribing if you'd like to see future Star Citizen content, and check out the video description for details of my active Star Citizen organisation. Other than that, thank you for watching.